Problems are something that face us every day. Whether they're minor in scope or major in scale, there's no way to avoid being called upon at some point to do the most daunting of tasks: solve the problem. My name is Art Gelwicks, and for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you some ways to help define the problem, generate new ideas, and get closer to that always elusive solution. Now, a little bit about my background to help you get comfortable with the concepts and the approaches that I'm going to cover. I've been a professional technology consultant for over 30 years, specializing in identifying problems and designing solutions primarily in the areas of work management and collaborative communications. My specialty, though, is helping people understand the problems that they are trying to solve and identifying opportunities using the tools and the resources that they already have on hand. So let's get into the heart of the matter. When you get called upon to solve a problem, or you're trying to solve a problem for yourself, there are some basics you need to cover before trying to find your answers. The first step in creative problem solving is to understand the basics. What I mean is that you need to understand the parts of the problem and how they work. How did this problem become a problem in the first place? What is its impact? Can the problem get worse if you don't do anything? Taking time to properly define the problem makes all the difference when generating new ideas. I suggest you start with the 5 W's to kick off your thinking. Who is impacted by the problem? What is the impact on them, you, and others? Where does the problem occur? When does the problem occur? And why does it happen? Ergo, what is its triggering event? After you've answered the 5 W's, as well as you can at this stage in the process, try to answer the question, can it get worse through inaction? Now, why would you be asking a question like that at this point in the process? Well, it's all about prioritization. Too often, I've seen people struggle and spend an exorbitant amount of time solving a problem that doesn't carry the necessary priority in relation to other problems. Now that you have a basic overview of the constituent parts of the problem, you need to look deeper. Start to look at the parts of the problem and how they interact. 2 main areas I recommend looking for when defining a problem are cascade relationships and symbiotic relationships. Cascade relationships are parts of the problem that are triggered by other parts of the problem. Picture a line of dominoes falling over. Actually, this might be best explained through an example. Let's take a look at a common problem that HR departments have to deal with: employee reviews. Let's say you need to process employee reviews on a quarterly basis, and you've been getting pressure from management because these reviews are not getting completed on schedule. Now, often, the common reaction is to pass that pressure along to the people who are submitting the reviews, who then pass the pressure along to the people who are completing the reviews and so on. Now, at no point is the actual problem of why are the reviews coming in late addressed, much less resolved, with this type of an approach. However, if we look at this problem through a cascade lens, you may discover the notifications on when the reviews are to be completed are not providing enough time to complete the initial drafts, which delays the review, the submission, the approval, and so on. Now, this may not solve this problem for you if you're experiencing this problem, but it's a good example as to how something upstream in a process can cause significant problems downstream. Where it seems very minor at the top, it can be very large at the bottom. Cascade thinking helps you focus on the triggers rather than the symptoms. So if we follow along with our previous example, our process for the submission of the employee reviews starts with a notification, goes through a draft creation, review, final version, approval, and then submission. If we don't use cascade relationship thinking, we may think that the solution to our problem happens in the submission step, because that's where we're seeing the problem occur, the delay upon submission. But by using cascade relationship thinking, we're able to recognize that the problem is originating all the way back in the notification step, causing a delay through the entire work stream that only shows up as the resulting symptom at the far end, being the submission step. It's very important that you not only understand the basics of your process, but you understand the steps and how they relate to each other. If you're familiar with project management methodologies, you may have heard of a phrase called finish to start relationships and start to finish relationships, where one task cannot begin until the previous task is finished. Those types of relationships, where one task is dependent on the previous one being completed, are very susceptible to cascade relationship problems, because you have a progressive impact if you have not built in buffers into your sequence of events that need to happen. Symbiotic relationships are when two problems, while separate, affect and influence each other. Let's take the example from the previous definition and change the scenario. Now, in this case, the quarterly employee reviews are being delayed, but when you dig into the problem, there's actually nothing wrong with the quarterly review process, at least on its own standing. Now look at the problem from a symbiotic perspective. Are there other problems that influence the problem while not directly being part of it? Here we discover that there are quarterly reviews due in the same time window, but the quarterly production reports and the strategic plan updates are also due. This time and resource bottleneck creates this symbiotic relationship between the problems, because when you try to complete one task or another task suffers. Symbiotic analysis requires a higher altitude of thinking and awareness about your problems. This is why it is so important to understand the basics of each problem. So if we illustrate my example from a moment ago, you can see how the employee reviews that are due at the end of the quarter, the strategic plan updates that are due at the end of the quarter, and the quarterly production reports that are due at the end of the quarter wind up creating a resource and time constraint, a bottleneck, that makes it almost impossible to get all three done on time because they're conflicting with each other. They don't actually have anything to do with each other. They're completely separate work streams. But in each of these cases, the amount of work necessary ties up resources and time, creating problems across the board. These types of symbiotic relationships that count on each other to be completed at a particular point, but are independent from each other, can create complex problems that are difficult to diagnose unless you take a higher altitude view as to how the problems are interacting. As we move closer to our goal, we need to have a better understanding of our pool of available resources. Now, these can include people, physical resources, digital resources, information, and other things that we can bring to bear on the problem. The key at this point is not only understanding what you have available, but also what are you missing, and this is the most important part, how can you offset those missing resources using the resources you have available? One of the biggest strengths of creative problem solving is being able to use the tools you have at hand rather than having to delay to solve the problem to obtain and learn new tools and new resources before you're able to put your solutions into motion. At this point, you may be generating some initial ideas for possible solutions, only to hear, well, we tried that before and it didn't work. Now, many people consider that a roadblock to a solution, but I'm going to challenge you to approach it as if it were an opportunity. You see, that person has just revealed that they have information that may be useful in defining a working solution. Review these past failures. Dig into why they failed. Was it a resource issue? Maybe a process issue? Could it have been a lack of definition? The more you understand about what was tried and failed, the greater the likelihood of future success. Never is the old axiom, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, truer than in this part of the process. But don't stop with the failures. Look into the limited successes. Find out what caused things to work for a while, but then go back to the way they were. Were there environmental changes? Maybe staffing changes. Perhaps a solution that worked but was too complex to be sustainable? All of these questions and more help in priming the pump for new ideas. Here's a pro tip for you as you're progressing. One of the things that I recommend is capturing what are called edge cases for later use. Now, you can commonly identify something as an edge case because you'll hear it mentioned through phrases such as, well, what about, or, but what if? These types of scenarios that people will often pull out are not the common situations that you'll encounter every day, but the rare opportunities for problems that crop up in a process or a work stream. Now, I don't recommend trying to solve for these edge cases right now. Just capture them. They will become very valuable later on in the process as we talk about the idea of use cases and how to evaluate our ideas based on these markers for potential difficulty. Now you've reached the point where you're ready to start coming up with ideas for your solution. Let's be clear though, nothing is a solution until it is tested. If you're in a meeting and someone exclaims, I have the solution, often coming from a management or leadership position, know that until the, quote, solution passes testing, it's nothing more than another idea no matter how good it sounds or how much authority is behind it. You're going to need to create a couple of things to help you test your ideation process and ideas at this point. Use cases are examples of a sequence of events or a situation that can trigger the problem. They're extremely useful in helping frame your thinking around a specific situation or sequence of events. If we follow our previous example, we may have a use case for a new employee completing their first review. We may also have a use case for new managers, for transferred employees, for departing employees, promotions, improvement plans, and so on. Each of these use cases help us walk through the problem and our solution ideas wearing the correct lenses so things aren't missed or misunderstood. Edge cases we mentioned previously. Now these are the exceptions to the rules that need to be taken into consideration when coming up with workable ideas. One of the most common mistakes is to allow edge cases to take control of your ideation process. We've all seen this happen in planning meetings. Someone experienced a specific, rather unique problem in the past and are set on making sure that the solution addresses that situation so it never happens again. What results is an over-expenditure of time and effort to solve for that issue at the neglect of the issues that really help the problem in greater ways. Edge cases can be extremely valuable, but they can also be like a 4-year-old with a cookie jar. They eat everything. Next is the creation of a proof of concept. Now this, for lack of a better phrase, is an incomplete solution. What you're trying to do with a proof of concept is in the name. Prove your concept. We don't need every detail to be addressed, every design to be complete, or every I dotted and T crossed. What you need is enough of a solution idea concept modeled to be able to run your use cases against and see how your ideas fare against them. As your ideas fail, and yes, they will fail repeatedly, which is a good thing, capture the details and update your proof of concept to address the issue. This works hand in hand with a concept called iterative design, which is commonly used in technology solutions. Simplified, it means to test your concept, make changes, and test again. Lather, rinse, repeat. Through each iteration, you learn more about the problem, the idea, and the ultimate solution. Here's another pro tip. In some cases, you may come up with 2 or more ideas for a problem, but none of them is a clear winner. This is when you can use A/B testing to help out. Let's say you have 10 example employee reviews that you're using to test your idea. Apply idea A to 5 of them and idea B to the other 5. See which works better. If you still don't have a clear answer, flip the groups and repeat the test. If you still don't have a clear winner, then it's likely they really are fairly equal, and you can focus on choosing the one that can be most easily and reliably implemented. But where did these ideas come from? If you're testing your ideas, there has to be a point where you're coming up with them, right? There are a number of different techniques you can apply to generate ideas. 5 of the ones I use with the greatest success are mind mapping, brainstorming, questioning, naming, and a process called best of 3. Mind mapping is the creation of visual relationship maps between concepts, allowing them to grow and refine themselves organically. It takes a little while to get comfortable with how information is shared and related using mind maps, but once you do, you may find them to be an invaluable tool. I use mind mapping constantly in the initial stages of gathering information about a problem. The benefit of the visual interface, it allows me to see the entire set of information gathered about a problem in one view, and then create relationships dynamically between those ideas, often revealing to me aspects of the problem or even questions to ask that I would never have seen if I had just written everything down in a normal set of notes. There are a number of different tools out there that help you do mind mapping. Many people will do it just using pencil and paper or whiteboard. Others will use digital tools. I personally lean to the digital tool side, primarily because I'm trying to shortcut the process of turning a mind map into a usable set of parameters to base the idea creation process on. The tools that I leverage, there's a great tool called FreeMind. I also use one called SimpleMind Pro. There are literally dozens of them out there. You can go out and search and find ones and try them. The basic mechanisms are the same. The details are in the applications themselves. Brainstorming is the process of rapid-fire idea creation without a focus on idea feasibility or execution. See, when you're brainstorming, you're not worried about the if and how an idea can be executed. The primary objective is to generate as many ideas as possible so you have the greatest chance of coming up with one or more potential solutions. There are a lot of strategies that go hand in hand with brainstorming, primarily after the ideas have been generated, how to filter and narrow and refine those targeted ideas to things that are actionable. I find one of the easiest ways to do brainstorming is using either pencil or paper or pen and sticky notes on a whiteboard, because it allows me to avoid the trap of structure. Often what can happen is if we try to brainstorm in an organized, structured tool, say an outlining tool or something like that, we get hung up on, is this in the right spot? Is this the right format? Should it be highlighted a different way? Should I tag it a different way? And we lose the focus on the open-minded connectivity between the ideas. So I recommend when you're trying to do your brainstorming, stay away from digital tools if possible. Stick with things that don't require any conscious effort to work with and allow your brain to run free on the ideas themselves. Questioning is an exercise where you are not capturing statements about how to solve the problem, but rather everything takes the form of a question, and then you answer that question. For example, instead of saying, we can get the review submitted on time by doing the following, you ask, how can we improve the frequency of on-time submissions? These open-ended questions help you spur your creative problem-solving ideas and expand the possible range of solutions. Instead of making a statement that this will be the solution, that open-ended question, how can we improve the frequency, could open the floodgates to improving notifications, changing the submission form, spreading the workload out, spreading the time period out that it covers. All of these ideas can now come to fruition because you're addressing a question about a specific aspect of the problem, rather than making a statement as to this is the way it will be handled. The last thing you want to do as part of the ideation process is at any time limit where your ideas can go. Naming is an interesting technique. It's similar to new product development in the way that you give a solution a name and then design it as if it were a physical product. The On-Time Employee Evaluator 2000 could be the name of this fictitious product that's going to solve your submission problems. You then design what it looks like, how it works, how people learn about it, how do you support it. All the aspects of this tool or this solution you treat as an entity. It helps to provide context, it helps to provide relevance, and it creates a relatable situation that often abstract ideation processes can struggle with. So instead of trying to come up with this broad brush of unique pie-in-the-sky type of ideas, by focusing on a named effort, you can really get your mental hands around the scope of the problem and stay focused and on target. I'm a fan of the best of three approach when it comes specifically to evaluating potential ideas. Each idea is evaluated for what is the best possible outcome from that idea, what is the worst possible outcome, and what is the most likely. I found frequently that when doing this, new ideas, edge cases, other use cases, and just unique perspectives often come about as you're having to analyze and think about the ideas that have been created in the first place. This exercise is not about judging ideas. It's giving yourself the opportunity to step aside from the idea and look at it from a different perspective. The more ways that you can review and think about and manipulate the ideas that you're creating, the greater the likelihood that new ideas will be generated. Finally, as you're narrowing down your solution ideas and you think you may have one or two, possibly three winners, I recommend evaluating each idea on some additional measures. First, what will be required to implement such an idea, and do you have the resources, time, and support necessary to make it happen? Second, what is the change management you need to put into place for people to adopt and implement the idea? Again, do you have the time, resources, and support to make the change management happen? Third, does the new idea have reporting requirements to determine its rate of success? If so, what are they? And how is the information to be captured and acted upon? Fourth, how will you gather feedback from the people impacted by the implementation of the new idea and put that feedback into use? And fifth, does this idea create new problems? And if so, how will those be resolved or mitigated? As you can see, new ideas are more than just light bulbs of inspiration. Good ideas come from an in-depth understanding of the problem, the resources and tools involved and available, and how they fit together. Too often, someone will try to sell you the perfect solution to your problem. When this happens, you have to stop and ask yourself, if they haven't looked at my problem and don't have a deep understanding of its unique nature, how can they be so sure they have the solution? Here's my final pro tip for coming up with ideas. Practice every day. Look at processes and things around you, whether they're working or not, and ask yourself, could they be better? Take time to learn your tools in depth and study their parts so that when it comes time to put them to use, you know what is doable and can use that to speed and strengthen your ideation processes. Now, I hope you found this useful in strengthening your confidence in coming up with new ideas to your problems. Now, while this isn't something that happens overnight, with practice and dedication, you can turn yourself into an idea pump as well. To learn more about these and other ways to strengthen your creative ideation processes, I'm going to encourage you to follow me on the Idea Pump on Twitter, or come visit theideapump.com, where not only do I talk about creative ideation processes, but other productivity tools, methodologies, and approaches. You can also hear me on the Being Productive podcast and on the Productivity Cast with Francis, Augusto, and Ray. I hope you're successful in your ideas, and I hope to hear from you soon.